I'm David Cott, host of New History of Spain, and this is episode 8, titled Early Roman Empire and Romanization of Hispania. In this episode, you will learn about the political history of Roman Hispania up to the crisis of the 3rd century, as well as the concept of Romanization, its causes, and its effects on the pre-Roman peoples of Hispania. The Principate, the political regime of the early Roman Empire. In Spanish and Italian historiography, but not so much in English historiography, the history of the Roman Empire is divided into two periods. The early Roman Empire, also known as the Principate, which lasted from 27 BC when Augustus became emperor until 235 AD, when the crisis of the 3rd century began, and the late Roman Empire, also known as the Dominate, which started in 284 AD when Diocletian became emperor. Augustus established the Principate as an autocratic regime where the emperor ruled, moving away from the oligarchic government of the senatorial aristocracy of the late Roman Republic. However, the facade of the old republican government remained, and the Senate was still politically irrelevant. The emperor was considered a princeps, or primus inter pares, meaning the first citizen among equals, a prominent figure who held political and military leadership due to his virtues. The emperor had extraordinary military powers over the so-called imperial provinces, that had a strong military presence because they were not considered fully pacified. In contrast, there were senatorial provinces, where the Senate could appoint governors, and the emperor did not send specific instructions to these governors as he did with the imperial provinces. This division of provinces was a political compromise between the Senate and the emperor to balance republican and monarchical or autocratic styles of government. However, in practice, this compromise favored the emperor, as he could still appoint many officials and issue laws that affected the entire empire. Once the conquest of Hispania was completed, it was divided into 3 provinces: Tarraconensis, covering the entire east, north, and central part of Iberia; Lusitania, covering the west without including modern Galicia; and Baetica in the south, considered a fully pacified province that followed Roman ways of life. Thus, it became a senatorial province. For the military and civil administration of the vast Roman Empire, Augustus and his successors in the early Roman Empire relied on senators, or patricians, the equestrian order, and freedmen who were former slaves of the state. The imperial cult was promoted, giving the emperor a divine status, but diverse religious beliefs were respected as long as they did not threaten the empire's ideology. The succession system of the Principate usually worked through adoption or designation by the previous emperor, although sometimes the successor was not part of his biological family. Some emperors gained power through palace or military coups, while hereditary successions from father to son, typical of later monarchies, were uncommon. Augustus inaugurated the period of relative peace and prosperity due to the Romans' political supremacy in the Mediterranean world, and the borders stabilized with few new conquests during the early Roman Empire period, except for the British Isles and Dacia, now modern-day Romania. What is Romanization? Until a few decades ago, people saw Romanization as a great civilizing effort, a positive change in which the native Hispanians adopted a superior culture. This view is not neutral, and was used to justify European imperialism and colonialism. In reality, Romanization was a long process of cultural change that was neither planned by the Roman state as a systematic eradication of native cultures, nor did it mean that pre-Roman people simply abandoned their culture and passively accepted Roman culture. Instead, Romanization was a spontaneous, gradual, and diverse process resulting from the interaction between Roman and native cultures. What it meant to be Roman varied by time, place, religion, language, legal and economic status, and connection to Roman administration. Roman identity was not the same in a large city like Cadiz as in a remote village in northern Iberia, just as being Spanish or American can be understood in different ways. Roman identity showed in language, material culture, urban planning, laws, administration, and social organization. However, it would be wrong to understand Romanization as cultural hybridization, which would imply a mix of cultures on an equal footing, as was for instance the case with the Tartessian culture resulting from the interactions between the indigenous cultures of the southwest and the Phoenicians. No studies so far have focused on the cultural changes experienced by Italic immigrants in Hispania, but it's assumed that the Italic conquerors or settlers did not experience significant cultural change. Therefore, Romanization should be seen as a process where Roman elements became predominant, but with regional variations influenced by the native pre-Roman culture of each Hispanian region. As discussed in episode 7, Roman conquest of Hispania, the conquest took 2 centuries, leading to a Romanization at different speeds, with the greatest changes occurring between 100 BC and 100 AD. The Carthaginian conquest of Hispania ironically paved the way for Romanization. This is because the Punics started an urban and territorial organization with large cities ruled by oligarchies, as well as an extractive model of economic exploitation that the Romans later adopted. Even before the Carthaginian conquest, the ancient Tartessian and Iberian territories were open to foreign contacts with the Phoenicians and Greeks. This made Romanization easier and more intense in the southern and eastern parts of Iberia, where fertile lands and important mines attracted many Italic settlers. However, it was not a quick, automatic process. Even in the 1st century AD, pre-Roman ceramics, religious rituals, and dietary patterns were observed in Turdetania, and Phoenician and indigenous cultural traits persisted. Cultural continuities should not be seen as a failure in the Roman integration of Hispania. It's common in processes of acculturation. For instance, in the 1st century BC, the Turdetanians adopted new tableware reflecting Italic influence. Before the Roman era, they mainly used pots, mortars, and basins because they had a simple gastronomy based on cereals. But under Roman rule, they started using casseroles, plates, and frying pans. This shows how Romanization was gradual, with pre-Roman continuities that adopted Roman forms. In central Iberia, Romanization took longer because the region was incorporated later and had fewer natural resources. There, Roman identity appeared more in the form of Roman villas, sort of fancy country houses, rather than cities. Galicia and the mining regions of Leon and Astorga Romanized quickly after the Roman conquest due to the empire's interest in their mines and the presence of Roman soldiers. In contrast, the Cantabrian Mountains and the more rugged areas of Vasconia retained some pre-Roman elements throughout the early Roman Empire. Roman identity there was different due to the lack of cities, fewer Italic settlers, and less developed land and sea communications. In the north, Castros persisted even though the Romans forced many natives to leave their fortified hilltop settlements to live in valleys, which are easier to control. And ancient Basque did not disappear despite Roman rule. Consequences of Romanization. So, what changed with Romanization? Actually, quite a lot, including social hierarchies, language, religion, customs, material culture, technology, law, and urban planning. Let's start with the language. Latin became the common language of the Roman Empire. The upper classes of Hispania adopted it first to communicate with Roman soldiers and administrators. Many native elites sent their children to Rome to learn Latin and meet influential people, which helped improve their social status. The poor did not receive a formal education, but Latin gradually spread to them as well. By the 2nd century AD, most native languages had disappeared, except for ancient Basque. However, it is a common mistake to believe that Latin was spoken the same way everywhere in the vast Roman Empire. The spoken dialects of Latin in Hispania were diverse due to the influence of the different pre-Roman languages. And this diversity influenced the later development of different Romance languages. By the 2nd century, most pre-Roman names had disappeared, replaced by Roman names and surnames. Other Roman customs and tastes, like their clothing, socializing in baths, gladiatorial fights, theater performances, and the Mediterranean diet based on cereals, wine, and olive oil, were also adopted. Romanization led to the complete transformation of pre-Roman social and political structures into the Roman social hierarchy. In engineering and urban planning, Romanization is very visible. During the Roman period, irrigation systems expanded, paved roads were built, and numerous amphitheaters, bridges, and aqueducts were constructed, many of which still amaze us today. The Romans founded cities like Córdoba, Tarragona, Valencia, Palma de Mallorca, Pamplona, Mérida, Zaragoza, and Barcelona. When we talk about the founding of a city in Roman times, it often means reorganizing a native settlement to meet specific urban standards and giving the settlement some administrative role. It's interesting to note that some native towns imitated Roman urbanism to appear more Roman and enhance their prestige. This is another common dynamic in many acculturation processes. As Hispania became more economically integrated into the Roman Republic and Empire, Roman currency, measurement units, and more advanced agricultural and mining techniques spread. About the legal system, the extension of Roman or Latin law took a long time to be generalized throughout Hispania, and did not happen until the end of the early Roman Empire. Roman leaders were reluctant to grant Roman or Latin laws to territories outside Italy because these laws conferred certain privileges. For most of the early Roman Empire, the majority of the inhabitants of Hispania were still considered peregrinos, basically foreigners without Roman citizenship rights. In terms of religion, various practices coexisted during the early Roman Empire. Roman polytheistic religion spread widely in Hispania by the end of the Republican period. The most important deities were those of the Capitoline Triad: Jupiter, the king of gods, representing power and authority; Juno, the queen of gods and goddess of motherhood and life; and Minerva, goddess of wisdom, art, and war. There was a mix of native, Phoenician, and Greek deities replaced by Roman ones, but indigenous religious beliefs also continued. The imperial cult was quickly adopted, held by the Iberian and Celtic social institution of devotio, as explained in episode 5, Pre-Roman Peoples of the Iberian Peninsula. Due to troop movements, civilian migrations, and trade, Oriental beliefs from some Syrian, Egyptian, or Persian deities also spread in Hispania. There were Jewish communities living in Hispania, but there is little evidence of Christianity spreading in this region until the 3rd century. Now, before moving on to the next section, I remind you that if you are enjoying the episode and are new, you can subscribe to the YouTube channel or the podcast for more content about the history of Spain. If you appreciate my work, you can go to patreon.com/newhistoryspain and support me financially for some exclusive benefits. And here is a question to see if you are paying attention. Do you think the Roman Empire is built too favorably? I look forward to your response in the comments. Causes of Romanization. We have already seen the visible consequences of Romanization. But what key elements caused this transformation of pre-Roman ways of life? The first key factor is the constant presence of Roman and Italic soldiers. There were between 20,000 and 25,000 soldiers permanently stationed in Hispania until the end of the 1st century AD. If there was a campaign led by the consul, these numbers could easily double or triple. Many military camps later became permanent urban settlements, as seen in León, Astorga, Tarragona, or the Roman quarter of Ampurias. Soldiers played a significant role in Romanization, especially after completing their military service, because many received or bought land and married native women. Additionally, the Roman army built roads and bridges, which improved communications and kept the empire united and exposed more isolated communities to Roman culture. The army's role in Romanization was twofold. Roman and Italic soldiers and veterans settled in Hispania, and native Hispanians learned Roman customs when they joined the army. When these native soldiers returned home, they brought Roman customs with them and became agents of Romanization in their communities. Nonetheless, natives did not integrate into the Roman army overnight. During most of the Republican period, natives served as temporary auxiliaries and fought using their own weapons and tactics. Over time, they gradually integrated into the regular Roman army. As Italic soldiers who didn't live in Rome began serving in the legions, someone had to fill the gap left by the permanent Italic auxiliaries. Hispanians became these permanent auxiliaries, and even before the early Roman Empire, there was already a Roman legion entirely made up of Hispanians. Hispania was a land of opportunities for many Italics to get rich or escape poverty due to the social crisis at the end of the Republic, as discussed in the previous episode. The Italic colonization of the 2nd century BC was quite disorganized and involved mostly Italics without Roman citizenship, who settled in indigenous villages that paid tribute to Rome. This Italic immigration was linked to the civil and military administration or the search for personal enrichment, with mining being the sector that attracted the first waves of Italic migrants. Their presence was especially intense in Turdetania and Cartagena because of their mineral resources and agricultural lands. During the Republican period of conquest, Italic settlements were founded by provincial governors. For example, Italica, in modern-day Santiponce, Seville, was founded next to a pre-existing Turdetanian town in 206 BC after the Roman victory in the Battle of Ilipa. This settlement remained for many years a Turdetanian city with a significant Italic community, estimated at around 3,000 Italics, and it played an important political and economic role due to its control over the southwestern mines. In the Phoenician Punic city of Carteia in the Bay of Algeciras, many soldiers and veterans settled after the Second Punic War, and many mixed marriages occurred with Turdetanian and Phoenician women. Because of that, the soldiers sent a delegation to Rome to request that their children be considered Roman. That was not granted, but Carteia was recognized as the first colony with Latin rights outside of Italy. During the Republican era, the most common way for provincials to access Roman citizenship was through becoming the mayor of a city, which required a good amount of money because they were expected to pay for many public expenses. In this context, Pompey and Julius Caesar granted Latin and Roman citizenship rights to their Hispanian supporters to reward their political and military support, as part of their measures to transition from an oligarchic to an autocratic form of government. Julius Caesar granted Roman citizenship to all citizens of Cadiz and elevated it to a municipality with Roman law in 49 BC, due to the close collaboration of the Phoenician family of the Cornelius Balbus for their political and military support. This led to the abandonment of Phoenician Punic institutions and laws, although the citizens of Cadiz continued to be proud of their Phoenician heritage. On the opposite side, Caesar punished cities and individuals who supported Pompey with heavy fines and confiscations. This is why the founding of colonies was more common in Hispania Ulterior, as its cities had supported Pompey more. Julius Caesar and Octavian Augustus organized and intensified Italic colonization with civilian settlers from the poor proletarian class of Rome, and demobilized veteran soldiers after the Civil War to also address the socioeconomic problems in Italy. They founded new cities, the basic administrative units of the Roman Empire, and since the layout, streets, and notable buildings of a city reflect a certain social order and culture, cities were agents of Romanization. Moreover, under Julius Caesar and Augustus, many Hispanian cities of indigenous, Phoenician, or Greek heritage adopted Roman or Latin law and Roman forms of local government. This policy of elevating Hispanian cities to the status of Roman or Latin municipalities had several purposes. It advanced the political integration of Hispania into the Roman Empire and rewarded the loyalty of cities, indigenous elites, and Hispanian soldiers. Municipalization did not aim to extend this status to all Hispanian cities, but rather to dominate and exploit the territories under Roman rule with a few privileged cities. The Roman administration itself was a Romanizing element, because provincial governments unified the diverse pre-Roman forms of political, social, and economic organization in Hispania. From the natives' perspective, local elites faced a dilemma when facing the Romans. They could either collaborate or oppose them by force. Those who opposed Rome died or lost their privileged social position, while those who collaborated preserved or improved their status within their community. Sometimes indigenous people rose against their collaborationist elites because they benefited from land grants that others could not access. This shows that, as in any conquest, there are always collaborators and opponents. In the end, the pre-Roman Hispanian elites, on whom the Romans relied on to sustain their rule over Hispania during the Republican period, prevailed. These indigenous elites imitated the Roman way of life to enhance their prestige and opportunities, as well as their economic and social privileges, thus becoming agents of Romanization. Vespasian's Edict of Latin Rights. Continuing with the political history, the Julio-Claudian dynasty of Augustus promoted the political integration and economic development of Hispania. After a period of civil war, they were replaced by the Flavian dynasty of Vespasian in 69 AD. Vespasian conducted a land survey throughout the empire to improve public finances and revoked many private mining concessions so that only the state could exploit them. With improved public finances, Vespasian invested in public works, and many Roman bridges, amphitheaters, temples, and forums in Hispania were constructed under the Flavian dynasty, as well as new cities in northwestern Hispania. Vespasian purged the Senate to introduce new men from the Italic bourgeoisie and provincial elites who were more loyal to him. Under the Flavian dynasty, the number of Romans of Hispanian origin in the imperial administration increased, forming a cohesive Hispanian party that grew in political influence until it lost its cohesion under Emperor Hadrian. Hispania flourished under the Flavian dynasty, and one of Vespasian's most important decisions was the Edict of Latin Rights. Unfortunately, we have limited information about this edict, which has caused debate among historians. There is no consensus on whether it affected all of Hispania, if it granted Latin rights to Hispanian cities or all inhabitants of Hispania individually, including those of the least Romanized regions. It seems more likely, based on preserved municipal charters, that the Edict of Latin Rights allowed Hispanian cities to adopt Latin law. This also made it easier for its members, of their elites, to obtain Roman citizenship. If this interpretation is correct, most Hispanians continued to be foreigners without Roman citizenship rights, and in that sense, Vespasian would have just continued the path opened by Julius Caesar and Augustus to rule Hispania with a few privileged cities. As for why Vespasian issued the Edict of Latin Rights, it was mainly because Hispania helped him become emperor. The region was quite Romanized and peaceful at this point, and the extension of Latin law made it easier to recruit Hispanians and involve them more in the empire's administration. Trajan and Hadrian, the Roman emperors from Hispania. In the year 96, the Flavian dynasty lost power due to its conflict with the patricians of the Senate, as they increasingly aimed to build a hereditary and deified dynasty. This led to the establishment of adoptive successions with the Antonine dynasty. As I mentioned, under the Flavian dynasty, a powerful faction of senators, soldiers, and public officials emerged that promoted two emperors born in Hispania, Trajan and Hadrian. They were the first Roman emperors born outside Italy, but both had Roman ancestry. This is important to note because some nationalists have wrongly presented them as Spanish emperors or suggested they had native Hispanian ancestry, but that is not true. Trajan was chosen for being a popular military leader, and as a ruler he embraced Stoic ideals of austerity, meritocracy, respect, authority, and calmness in the face of adversity. He implemented social welfare policies, promoted a wide range of public works throughout the empire, and expanded the empire to its greatest extent with the conquest of Dacia and his campaigns in Mesopotamia and northern Arabia. Hispania benefited from his public works program, and Trajan ordered the expansion of cities, the construction of bridges and amphitheaters, and the repair and extension of Roman roads, focusing especially on the neglected region of Lusitania. Some sectors of the Roman elite criticized Trajan for his favoritism towards Hispano-Romans, the Romanized Hispanians in the bureaucracy and army. However, due to his achievements, Trajan is considered to have equaled or even surpassed Augustus. His successor, Hadrian, adopted a policy of consolidating conquests and establishing defensible borders, exemplified by Hadrian's Wall in Britain, and withdrawing Roman troops from Mesopotamia. Hadrian continued the social welfare and public works policies of his predecessor, and traveled throughout the Roman Empire to understand and personally address its problems, showing he was a down-to-earth emperor. For example, he convened an assembly in Tarragona with representatives from all over Hispania and asked them to contribute many soldiers to deal with wars in Britain and Mauritania. Hadrian initially relied on Hispano-Romans for key administrative positions and to fill the army ranks. But this changed over the years, and he began incorporating people from other parts of the empire. In summary, the governments of Trajan and Hadrian are remembered for their prosperity, justice, and relative peace, marking the peak of Roman power. The Roman Empire on the defensive. After Emperor Hadrian ended the predatory actions against neighboring peoples, the Roman Empire shifted to a defensive stance, relying on its own resources. The Roman economy gradually lost its dynamism, while maintaining a large bureaucracy and armies. Many cities had grown because local elites financed construction projects and charitable works to gain public offices and economic benefits. However, this artificial growth was unsustainable, and many cities were deeply indebted. Many wealthy individuals abandoned their local offices and urban residencies to move to the rural estates, and thus escaped the growing economic burden of being a mayor or part of the local council, which in turn exacerbated the economic problems of the cities. These trends, which began before the end of the 2nd century, led to a political and economic crisis that transformed the Roman Empire in the following century. Hispania showed signs of economic decline earlier than other parts of the empire, with a decrease in mining and olive oil production during the reign of Antoninus Pius, who ruled from 138 to 161. His reign was marked by peace, good administration, a large surplus in the treasury, and the expansion of access to drinking water and construction works in regions like Gaul. Under emperors Marcus Aurelius and Commodus, Roman supremacy was tested with the Germanic military incursions on the northern frontier and Berber tribes in the Maghreb. However, the Roman Empire's troubles were mainly due to the Antonines plague, which killed around 10% of the empire's total population, with a higher percentage in cities. The Antonine dynasty ended with Commodus, and the Severan dynasty took power at the end of the 2nd century. The Severans sowed the seeds of a great economic crisis by dramatically increasing soldier salaries. Since the state couldn't pay for that, they devalued the Roman currency. This obviously caused high inflation, distrust in the Roman currency, and a general economic disaster, as has happened in modern times in Zimbabwe, Venezuela, or Argentina. Hispania suffered more than other regions because landowners invested their wealth in other regions like modern-day Tunisia. Hispano-Roman society became demilitarized, as it had been pacified for a long time and was far from conflict zones, so the recruitment of soldiers from Hispania massively decreased, as had happened earlier in Italy. The infamous Emperor Caracalla then granted Roman citizenship to all free people of the Roman Empire, not as an act of kindness, but to tax them more heavily and have more men available for the army. With this law, Roman citizenship lost its value, as everyone had it, and those who received it now had to pay more taxes than before, so they were not particularly happy or proud to be Romans. Alexander Severus became the last of the Severan dynasty, and his reign faced threats from the emerging Sassanid Empire in the east and Germanic confederations in the north. But what proved fatal for Alexander Severus was the breakdown of military discipline and the continuous conspiracies within the army. He was assassinated by mutineers in Germania in 235, ending the principate established by Augustus and starting the long crisis of the 3rd century that nearly destroyed the Roman Empire. The verdict. In today's verdict, I want to say that Romanization is not an exceptional cultural phenomenon at all. In fact, many forms of cultural transformation ending with ization have existed and still exist. Examples include Arabization, Hispanicization, Russification, and even Uzbekization, and this is not a meme. Cultures can expand peacefully and voluntarily, mixing on an equal footing, or impose by eradicating the subdued culture. However, it's common for states to try to expand their borders, wealth, and culture. Even so, as we will see in many other episodes, cultural transformations are rarely totally one-sided. And when two cultures interact, they both change. And with that, the verdict ends. If you like the YouTube channel and the podcast New History of Spain, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell on YouTube. You can also become a Patreon on patreon.com/newhistoryspain to get benefits like early access or exclusive merch. The links are in the description. In the next episode, I will talk about the society and economy of Roman Hispania, the Christianization of Hispania, and the political history of the late Roman Empire from the crisis of the 3rd century to just before the barbarian migrations. Subscribe so you don't miss it, and see you next time!